This is Moral of the Story. Interesting people telling their favorite short stories and then breaking them down to understand what makes them so good. I'm your host, Max Czerpowski. Today's guest is Shea Hillenbrand, whose story is the kind of roller coaster ride that movies are based on. When Shea was in Mrs. Murphy's fifth grade class, he raised his hand to share his two dreams, playing Major League Baseball and owning a zoo. The class laughed at him, and as he put his hand down, he vowed to prove them wrong. The summer before his sophomore year in high school, Shea's family moved from SoCal to Arizona. Guess when is not a good time to move a kid to a new city? And so, Shea struggled with his self-esteem, his confidence, and his relationship with his father. Thankfully, he found comfort in sports. He excelled in soccer and became Arizona's top-ranked player, but none of that was good enough for his dad. Meanwhile, Shea did whatever it took to make his MLB dreams a reality, walking onto a community college team and eventually securing a spot and becoming Arizona's top junior college baseball player after his sophomore season. Shea was obsessed with baseball. As a young Dodger fan in the 80s, he remembers the crack of the bat, the freshly cut grass, the roar of the crowd. But he also imagined himself in the batter's box, as thousands called his name. The difference between Shea and the countless kids obsessed with ball games? On opening day 2001, Shea took the field at Fenway Park as the Boston Red Sox starting third baseman. And with the national anthem blaring over the speakers, Shea remembered that determined fifth grader in Mrs. Murphy's class as tears streamed down his face. He'd made it. But as the seasons passed, he realized that he was playing the game for all the wrong reasons, and he still didn't have his father's approval. And so after 7 years, he could take it no longer, and he walked away. From his childhood dream, from $50 million, and from the life he thought he'd always wanted. Shea then turned his attention to his second dream, buying a 38-acre horse farm for $6 million and filling it with 300 farm and exotic animals. As the business grew and countless children laughed away the days in the petting zoo, Shea thought that this is what he'd been searching for, but again, fulfillment eluded him. And so, one night, he found himself in a white van parked outside his house with a bottle of vodka and pills, staring down the only way that he knew would be absolute. As his kids slept in their beds, proud of their baseball-playing dad, he chased the pills with the vodka and let go. Luckily for Shea and many others, he woke up the next morning to the sun shining down on him through the windshield. He was alive, although with one hell of a hangover. Shea took it as a sign. Slowly, painfully, one little win at a time, he started to take control of his life. And as his momentum built, he met his wife, Kristen, redefined his identity, and transformed himself to seek fulfillment from the inside, realizing that if he's not good enough for himself, he'll never be good enough for anyone else. It's an ongoing process, but Shea is relentless. See, it was never about baseball or even the zoo. It had been about Shea all along. On the other side of the abyss, Shea has embraced his mission of helping others through their own emotional turmoil, and he's never been happier. Shea, welcome to the show, brother.
Thank you so much. It's extremely emotional, man. Being able to relive that and your soothing voice, and you have a gift. And I appreciate you sharing it the way you did, the articulation, and being able to give your audience a little bit of an insight of my journey in life and where I am right now.
Thanks, man.
So thank you.
Well, thank you. I'm just summarizing. You're the one that lived it. So thank you. Now you're here to tell us a story. Is there anything that we should know before we get started? Do you want to set the stage at all?
It's one of those things to where I, like so many men out there, would live in quiet desperation. And regardless of what you do on the outside, the accomplishments, the achievements, the levels of status, the success, the monetary, the money, whatever that might be, I find it so common for so many people to be living in a space, especially men, in quiet desperation. And I have two older brothers, and my father had a generational curse that took him over and ultimately took his life 6 years ago. with the struggles and the pain that he had to go through to be able just to keep his head above water from the internal turmoil and the stuff he dealt with his whole life for 76 years.
Wow. So
looking back, I've been able to rewrite history. And that's my mission here today. And my hopes with the end goal of being able to have the listeners or the viewers, your audience, to be able to see and understand that we have the power. We have the remote. We have the ability to rewrite that script, rewrite that transcript, rewrite that story, that narrative, that movie that we have playing over in our head over and over and over again every single day, stemming from experiences in our life.
That's powerful.
I didn't know I'd be this way, so it's cool, man. I appreciate this.
All right. Well, let's
platform.
Get into it. Tell me a story.
I remember eating supper really quick. I guess I call it supper. I don't know why I call it supper, because I grew up in Southern California, but my mom grew up in Missouri, so she called it supper. And I just eat as fast as I could, because I knew after dinner I would be going outside, either on the basketball court in our driveway or off the batter's tee in the backyard or on the side of the house, kicking a soccer ball, something to get me going and keep me moving every single day as I was growing up and through my adolescence and through my high school years. But this one particular day is a day when I'm 11 years old. And we would always eat dinner as a family. And that's one thing I always cherished. And I think that's falling by the wayside now with families nowadays, is we don't really realize the importance and the value of having dinner together as a family. So we always would do that. And after dinner, I would scarf my food down. And the nights that we'd have meatloaf, I would absolutely hated my mom's meatloaf. But if you don't finish your food, you can't go outside and play. Mm-hmm. To preface the story, I want your viewers and your listeners to understand that I would never listen to music. I never watched TV. Matter of fact, I didn't listen to music till I was 14 years old. And at 14 years old, I came across a band called Milli Vanilli. And their hit song is "Blame It on the Rain." And I would always just, some way, somehow, that would just really get me into a mood to go out there and take the next step. But I didn't realize that the band didn't even play their own songs. They're using other people's songs and other people's voices, all that stuff. So I don't know what it was. There was something inside myself that drove me to not sit around and go out. And I'd find myself lost in the presence and in the shuffle of mastering the skill sets of playing sports. And when I figured out that I was doing that, that alleviated all of the internal hell that I was going through, the pain, the turmoil, the trying to articulate those feelings and what I was going through, and understanding that, you know what, I don't feel like I fit in. I don't feel like I'm better than anybody else, because I definitely don't feel that, or didn't feel that, but I never felt like I fit in. So it was really difficult for myself. Okay, where can I fit in? I could fit in a space of sports, because I was athletically, I don't know if I could say gifted, but I was a little bit better than other players. I was a little bit better than my comrades and a little bit better than my classmates. So this one day after dinner, I was like, "Hey, Dad, do you want to go out front and play basketball?" And like I said, I have two older brothers. I have one brother, Eric, who's 4 years older than me, and I have an older brother, Brian, who's 6 years older than me. So I was the baby. And I was the ultimate competitive person. I was the kid that came home after Little League and 9 years old, and to be mad in the car, and my mom was like, "What's wrong with you, Shea? You guys won." And I say, "Mom, you don't get it. The other players on my team, if they just tried, if they just gave effort, maybe might give ourselves a chance to win. Like we're not winning because they're not trying as hard. They don't care." So trying to articulate those feelings and those emotions and that perspective and that outlook on life, to where at 9 years old, 10 years old, 11 years old, not having that support to be able to articulate that wasn't a common thread in our household. So I asked my dad to go play basketball, and we go out front. And we're playing basketball in the driveway, and it's just my dad and myself. And I see my middle brother, Eric, who now is 6'4.5", and my oldest brother, Brian, coming out of the garage door from the kitchen through the garage out to the basketball court. And we're out there all like, oh, let's play a 2-on-2. And I'm like, oh my gosh, now I'm not going to be able to compete. I can't understand. They're older than me. I can't keep up with them. All these thoughts are going through my mind. And as we proceed to play this game, and just a game after supper in the driveway, it was my dad and myself against my two older brothers. And I couldn't shoot the ball. I couldn't pass the ball. They were so far advanced than I was because they were older. And every time I went to shoot the ball, my middle brother Eric would swat the ball in my face. Or if I go to pass the ball, they intercept it because I'm 11 years old. And it was no holds barred, right? So I believe between the three brothers, my two older brothers and myself, the three kids, I think we're all vying for attention from my father to try to say, you know what, I'm good enough. Did you see that? I'm good enough in your eyes, aren't I? And my father was never really in that place to be able to see that because his perspective of how he viewed the world was jaded from the stuff that he was going through and the internal turmoil that he was experiencing. So long story short, halfway through the game, we're playing to 11, we get to 6 or 7, and I just had enough. I'm overwhelmed emotionally. I'm so competitive, and I'm getting defeated. The ball slapped in my face, and my brother's mimicking me, and they're making fun of me, and all these things are going through, and I'm an 11-year-old boy that's extremely emotional, extremely passionate, extremely energetic, extremely competitive, and I start crying. And I'm shooting the ball, and my brother's slapping in my face, and they're making fun of me. And after 2 more shots, I just had enough. I had to escape. I had to move. I had to go. And I just run through the garage. And I just run into the house, and I'm running into the house. My father says, "Go inside, you fucking baby. Go inside. Grow up." And as I'm going in there, and I'm going to slam the door, and he says, "Take off all your clothes and go to your room." And I go to my room crying, and I'm going to the kitchen, and my mom's cleaning the dishes like a traditional family in the 1980s. And my bedroom was off the family room, just off the kitchen. And I go in my room, and I slam my door, and I'm just crying profusely. And I can't even catch my breath, and I can't get anybody to understand, to support me. And I'm sitting there without any clothes on in my room, and you know, sitting in the middle of the floor of my room, and not in that place of, why me? Why me? What? Can anybody just see who I am? Those weren't going through my mind, and those weren't the emotions. It was the emotions of like, F you. F you. One day I'm going to show you that I'm good enough to be able to be in your presence, to be able to be good enough to wear Hillenbrand on the back of my jersey, to be good enough to represent our family, because no one in our family's done anything other than just the norm. Because there's always one person in the family that when things are going bad and things are going to a place to where things are normal and people are just surviving, and there's always one person in the family that says, you know what, I've had enough, and I'm going to take this family to the next level. And those thoughts were going through my mind at 11 years old. And this wasn't just a specific experience. It wasn't just an isolated experience. This happened time after time after time, to where I just get emotional, and my dad couldn't handle it because he was handling the internal turmoil of himself, and my brothers would just mock me, and I'd just sit in my room crying on the floor, so desperately wanting a hug, so desperately wanting to be seen, so desperately wanting to understand the feelings and the emotions that I was feeling, because I always knew I've been set apart from other people, but being set apart from other people for Shea Hillenbrand is extreme emotions, to be able to deal with that, extreme sensitivity, to be able to process things and be able to do things and be able to understand things. So at the place to where I needed the hug the most, just the understanding the most, like, you know what, son, it's all right. I understand you're frustrated, but let's understand that, let's see this and help you articulate. I never got that. I was never in a position to receive that. So whether it was playing basketball, or whether it was playing soccer on the soccer field, or whether it was playing baseball at school, the same thing just happened over and over and over. And every authoritative position I came into, I couldn't handle it because I wasn't good enough. I wasn't seen. And all I ever wanted, my whole life, my whole journey of being an elite athlete, a celebrity Major League Baseball player, was just to be seen. And I was never seen.
That is so hard to listen to because it just makes me want to jump into that story and find that kid in his room and just give him a hug. And sometimes that's all they need. Sometimes all you need is just to give him a hug. And as you said, just tell him it's going to be okay. Like there's this child therapist that we follow. And her name is Dr. Becky. And she has this book called, I think it's called Good Enough. And a really telling title of the book. And she has this social media presence and she will post these little snippets. And one of the things she posted recently was, it's powerful if you just walk up to a kid, give him a hug and say, hey, I know how hard it is to be a kid. I'm sure it's hard to be a kid. And I did that with my middle one, who is 5, one time. And she's also really kind of highly sensitive. And she just looked at me. She was like, thank you. Like, thank you for understanding, It is incredibly powerful. Going back to the story for a minute, let me ask you this. Why did your dad ask you to take all your clothes off when you ran to your room?
And it's a hard place to navigate. And I don't at any point or any way want to defile or degrade or devalue my father. And through my experience and through my transformation and studying and trying to understand, like, here I am, that's somebody who's had everything in the world. I lived both my childhood dreams and I still didn't feel worthy and I didn't have that feeling of freedom on the inside. So through my experience, what you do is when you have a child take his clothes off, you strip his identity from him.
Yeah.
And that's it. So nothing else happened. And I want to make that very clear. There was nothing else like, let me see your privates or zero, not even a question. It was just like, how do I make myself feel better by making somebody else that I have authority over to feel less than?
Yeah.
So I could see value of myself in that situation.
Yeah.
And what happens is you don't, and you just hate yourself and you just go through a journey of life of just disgusting and it's horrible. But I believe solely, I know what happened when that happened to me was you strip a child's identity when you do that some way, somehow.
Well, you take away their dignity, right? I mean, on some level, that's a basic sense of dignity. How was your relationship with your brothers as you got older? Did it get any better?
No, because they haven't done any work on themselves and they've stayed the same. And what I'm saying is, like, there wasn't really any traumatic experiences that we went through, but I believe when you become an adult, we've all been wounded. We all have had trauma in our lives. And if we don't address that, what happens is pain not transformed is transmitted.
Yeah.
Some way, somehow. For me, it was very successful in a baseball field because I was able to transmit that pain through competing on a nightly basis, which you need. Mm-hmm. But off the field, it's a different story. But for my brothers, must be nice to be you. Showing up at Thanksgiving. Oh, the superstar's here. Oh, that's cool. I show up in a H2 Hummer. That's $100,000 car. And it's pimped out. It's yellow. It's chrome. It's like pristine, like everything. And then my oldest brother has a H3 Hummer, which is stock. And the whole family is goo-goo gagaing over that. And then here comes my car sitting here. It's like, oh, okay, whatever. So it's just like, how do you process that when you haven't really understood how to work through those things? And it's just like, well, don't you guys see me? So I'm buying these things and flying private jets and and multiple mansions and multiple things to be able to just try to be seen and try to understand that if I just have this, I could hide behind this object with my fear of not being good enough, my fear of not being able to see who I am. So my older brothers is just, we want our kids to say that their uncle plays Major League Baseball, or hey, can I have this, or hey, can I have that, or whatever. So our relationships have always been, like the word that comes to my mind right now is like quasi. They're not bad, but it's not like, I don't know how to really have a relationship, or I didn't. You know, I know now with my wife, Kristen, as you said in my story, she's really been the blessing in my life that I've always needed to be able to understand how to stand in my value and understand that I am worthy and somebody loves me unconditionally and believes in me for me. It has nothing to do with what I did. And that's very difficult to go through as a person who's reached a status of success that very few people get. Is like people don't want to get to know you for who you are. It's always what you are. And that's why I said I'm top of the world. I'm cracking home runs and Yankee Stadium and on ESPN cashing $1 million paychecks, and I don't feel seen. Like, how could you not feel seen in that situation? So, yeah, it's powerful.
You know, I was wondering, as you were talking about your brother pulling up in the H3, have you ever thought that maybe he got that car because he felt in some way inferior to you because he wasn't the one playing Major League Baseball, and to him, this was kind of a small victory he could have over you?
Yeah, that's possible. It's something that's unfortunate because my oldest brother, Brian, he went to professional umpire school, and he was a top umpire in the minor leagues, and his wife he met made him quit. So she's really done a number on him and his kids and put a wedge between him and our family. So that is a possible thing.
Let me ask you this, Shea. As you think about the story you told, what would you say is the moral of that story?
The moral of that story is, it's funny because I did a therapy session probably 8 months ago. And the therapist said, find your place a safe spot that you could take your 9-year-old self, 11-year-old self. Mm-hmm. So you take a young child. It could be a beach. It could be wherever, music, family, wherever it might be. And he says, whenever you get it, let me know. And I said, I got it. Like, he didn't get a chance to finish. I said, I got it. He's like, well, where would you take that 9-year-old Shea? And I said, I'll take him in the batter's box in Yankee Stadium in front of 40,000 people. He's like, what do you mean? And I was like, yeah, that's the only place I felt solitude. It's the only place I felt sane or an escape from the internal turmoil that I was going through. And I would be able to protect that 9-year-old Shea in that environment because I mastered that mindset at a peak performance to be able to understand and leverage and rise above that pressure of being in that spot where very, very few people would be able to do that. But at that point in time in that batter's box in Yankee Stadium in front of 40,000 people, I would look at him in the eyes and say, I see you, and it's going to be okay. That's it. It's going to be okay. You will get through this. It's going to be okay. And if I had that said to me, or if I had that somehow conveyed to me, I think that would have made a difference in how I viewed myself.
That's an interesting perspective. I wonder if you had to go on that journey to truly arrive at where you are now. In other words, stronger, more self-loving, and more open. Or if you had not gone through that, if you had really have had such a powerful character arc, you know?
100%. And I'm a guy that thinks neutrally. I am a believer in God. And not one point in time in my journey did I blame God. Not one point in time in my journey. It is what it is, right? I can't change it.
Yeah.
The experiences that I went through. So I don't invest any energy, time, or effort to try to what if this or what if that, or man, I wish I would have here or that. The time and energy and effort I invested into that was to change my perspective of how my story played out.
Mm-hmm.
Looking back, if I had the support that I thought I needed, there was a very good chance I wouldn't have weathered the storms and be able to rise above the pressures at the highest levels of my profession of being a professional athlete, because very few people can even comprehend what a player goes through to be able to show up every single day to play Major League Baseball, because it's unlike any other sport. We play every single night. So those stories, those emotions, that pain, some of that stuff, I think, was the main corporate for, or the main, not culprit, but the main ingredient for me to get up every single day and drive and strive towards something. That feeling of not being good enough, I think was a really good, and I think it's a common thread against a lot of very successful people, of that feeling of not being good enough. I think that could be perceived in two different perspectives, right? I think the vast majority of people, 97% of people, have that same feeling, that same perspective of not feeling that I'm good enough and not being seen. And they use that as an excuse to refine those limited beliefs in their head to hold them back and say, you know what, life just passed me by. And then living with regret as they look back on their life as they get older and say, I wish I would have. Because I speak on stages around the world and I coach hundreds of people, and it's a common thing. So I think it's just something inside yourself inherently to be, okay, how am I going to use what I have to be able to fuel me towards whatever goals or visions or dreams I aspire to achieve? But there's one thing, is you're not going to tell me I can't play Major League Baseball.
Yeah.
Everybody else laughed. Everybody else fell off the wayside. All my friends were, they're just like, I don't know what y'all are doing. I'm going to play Major League Baseball. But if I had that vision and that idea of being set on, I'm going to play Major League Baseball, but if I didn't have that, whatever is going through inside, who knows if I would have been able to stay in the game.
The not being good enough is a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing because you're always striving for more. I struggle with some of that as well. You're always striving for more, and that's the positive. The negative is, no matter what you achieve, it's never going to be good enough by definition. And so you're never going to be at peace, right? That's the challenge. If you think about that story you told, why was that the story you chose to tell?
Because there's so many emotions involved with that stood out over the majority of the other stories that I went through. In a lot of me leading up to this, I didn't want to tell it because I don't want to shed darkness on my father, because he's just a victim of these stories that we tell ourselves.
Yeah.
And when my father passed, I reached down and kissed him on the head, and I said, I'm going to use my voice to change the world any way I can, Father. And it's interesting at 40 years old to have that perspective towards your father, when my whole life I hated him. I hated him. I'm at the 2005 All-Star game. I have my entourage there. I have everybody there. My parents are at the top deck of the stadium, humiliating themselves when I didn't invite them. I cut them out of my whole career because of those stories that I told myself, the narrative that I told myself about the story. And that's where the power lies. And that's the message that I want to convey, if I may, is true resilience doesn't come from bouncing back to where we were. And that's what I thought playing Major League Baseball. If I just bounce back after this at bat, if I just bounce back after this failure, if I just bounce back after this experience, if I just bounce back after this, when I got sent to my room and I'm sitting there crying, if I just bounce back after getting kicked off my junior high baseball team, my high school baseball team, my junior college, I got kicked off all my baseball teams because of that experience in my bedroom at 10 years old, 11 years old. So we always think, if I just bounce back and if I just get back in the game, if I do these things, we don't bounce back because we have neuroplasticity, and whatever you wire together and fire together, there's new neurons in our mind, in our brain. Through that experience, however you interpret and communicate that experience, is going to form a newer version of how you perceive the future. So it's all in a story you tell yourself about that story. And like I said at the beginning, the beautiful part is you're able to change that story. You're able to rewrite that script. You're able to understand a different perspective. But we just have to understand that when we do that, there's feelings and emotions that a lot of us don't like, that make us uncomfortable, that you have to go through to be able to rewrite that story. And the power is in that. The power is in your perspective.
Yeah,
I should have been $100 million baseball player.
Totally. And that's what makes it such a powerful decision. And you have to go through the darkness to get to the light. Let's talk about storytelling for a second. If you think of some of the best stories you've heard, and I know you've heard many, what in your mind makes for a good story?
It's all in the pit. It's all in the pit moment. It's all in setting the stage with somebody. Because I love movies, I love storytelling, I love studying this stuff, and I mean, I love telling stories from the stage and just being able to reach into people's souls and challenge their perspective and their truth of how they view the world. I did it yesterday on social media, and I made some people mad. And okay, I get it, but I'm trying to challenge your perspective of your truth of how you view the world. And the way you do that is sharing your pit. The way you connect with people and get credibility with people is sharing the pit, those parts of your life that are dark, right? And
like the pit of your stomach you're talking about?
Baseball. No, the pit of the story, the pit of your journey. So it's like the valley of your journey, right? So the pit of my journey is leaving Major League Baseball, leaving $50 million on the table, and then walking away, leaving everything in the career. Like what drives you to do that? Well, pain and resentment and hurt and feeling numb, and there's a lot of things that do that. But good stories come through the depths of your soul. And I hear a lot of people tell stories, and when they tell stories, it's like they're resonating at, they're at like a surface level because they really haven't really processed through the truth of understanding of what's led them to where they are. And it's how you share that story with the energy that you convey and the vulnerability and the pureness of who you are, it just really resonates with a lot of people. Mm-hmm. And gets them to a position to where they can really challenge their truth, because that's what storytelling is about, right? Ultimately, you want to challenge somebody's truth. And the only way you can challenge somebody's narrative or challenge their truth of how they are is through a narrative. I can't just say, hey, here's 5 steps to do this. Let me teach you 4 things of how to hit a baseball. Well, what do you mean? Let me tell you a story. Because people love stories, right? And then like we were talking about before, is like stories just bring people together. It's just like, whoa, you experienced that? Wait. You were on top of the world, and I watched you on TV, and wait. You woke up in the morning like saying the F word because you hated your life, and you went to bed pondering your purpose and wondering if you had value in who you are and living in quiet. Yeah. That's the beautiful part of stories, being able to own your story, right? And being able to share that with genuineness, but from a place of where that story or that wound in that story is like a scar. It's healed over, right? It's not still opened. It's not still raw. It's not still to the place to where it's like you just throwing up on people and blah, blah, like, wait, dude, like chill. So we got to get to that place, but the true essence of that vulnerability that I'm talking about, that narrative that we tell ourselves about our story, that's the foundation of healing. We got to be able to heal that wound in our soul before we be able to tell our story. Mm-hmm. But the only way you can discover that wound in our soul that we're going through, because we're all wounded, is to be able to understand your story. But so many of us just sweep it under the rug because it's something that we're ashamed about. It's something that we have resentment in. I mean, there's not very many people that have messed up more than I have. And if I really sit and think about some of the stuff that I've done, or a lot of the stuff that I've done with my actions and ability to, I've burnt every bridge in my life. I've done so much damage throughout my story. But the beauty of it is owning it and accepting it. Mm-hmm. And the power of your story is being able to just share the truth and being vulnerable. And that's what people really want. And that's what I think is lacking a lot nowadays with social media and all these platforms that we have. It's just, we're lost. We don't feel seen.
Yeah.
And if I could help you feel seen by sharing my story with the depths of my soul to resonate at a higher energy, because there's so much buzz out there to try to get you to challenge and audit, right? I have to, wait, where am I? Yeah. What do I really think about myself? Who am I? And what do I want? And once you answer those two questions, it just opens up a whole nother world 100%. That I never thought would be possible with where I am right now. And I so desperately tried to seek as I was climbing the mountain of Major League Baseball.
Yeah. Well, I have to say, for not just for yourself, obviously, for your kids, for Kristen, for everyone that you're now helping, whether in training sessions or from the stage, I'm glad that you came through it on the other side. That does it, man. That does it. Shea Hillenbrand, thank you for being on the show and being vulnerable. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, buddy.
For sure, man. For show notes and more, head over to mosspod.org. Find us on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you get your podcast on. This was Moral of the Story. I'm Max Trapowski. Thank you for listening. Talk to you next time.